Hello, everyone. Welcome to Adventures in Theater History, where we bring you the best stories from the deep and fascinating history of theater in the city of Philadelphia. I'm Peter Schmitz, and our theme music is by Christopher Mark Colucci. In this episode, we are returning once again to the history of modern Philadelphia theater, and I am very honored to bring you the great Philadelphia actress, Jenny Grace Gonglewski, one of the leading actresses of the Philadelphia theater for the past 40 years. She recently was appearing with me in A Delicate Balance at the Walnut Street Theater, and I was able to grab her during a break in our performance run and record this interview with her. Stay tuned until the very end when I do a follow-up on our recent episode about the Trocadero Theater. It turns out that our subject today performed the last ever striptease at the Troc, which is quite an exciting little historical tidbit, I thought. Anyway, we'll get to that by the end, but enjoy the whole interview with Grace Gonglewski. I spoke to her in March of 2026. Grace Gonglewski, welcome to Adventures in Theater History.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be on this incredible podcast that I've only recently discovered, and I cannot stop binge listening. Gosh,
well,
it's
apparently you're
really
the target audience I've been looking for all along, Grace.
It's true.
But right now, we are backstage at the Walnut Street Theater. I actually, as you may remember, when I did that episode back in February about the early days of the Arden and the Lantern Theater. So we're actually up on the third floor again, but we've come backstage into the little dressing rooms in the back.
Yes.
But I wanted to acknowledge that you have a deep history at the Walnut Street Theater. In fact, it's the reason you were in Philadelphia at all.
That is very true.
So we'll come back to that. But let's go farther back in your origin story and how you, as I like to say to many of my interview guests, how you acquired your superpowers.
I was the fifth of 7 children, and I always wanted to be on stage. I always wanted to perform, sing, dance. I put on plays when I was a little kid and charged the neighbors a dime to come see them. I wrote things. I cast my sisters, and we did it. So I've been doing it ever since I can remember.
Where was this? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Swarthmore, actually, for a number of years, and then my family moved to Harrisburg area, like the center of the state. Just about 8 when we moved.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, we definitely went into Philadelphia. We saw the ballet and the orchestra. My parents were big musical lovers. My mother asked each one of us to play the piano until we were 17 and 2 other instruments besides. So Philadelphia was always the big city that I wanted to move back to, even when I was 10 years old.
Right.
And so when...
And you were the fifth of 7, you say? So
yeah.
do you think that being a performer was your way of getting attention in a large crowd of kids?
I think so too. I think that is true. And I also think that I had this deep emotional core that this world doesn't often have space for. And I loved emoting. I loved telling stories. I loved listening to my father sing, and I would weep. And that was sort of, people would say, okay, just, get yourself in order. But the theater welcomes that. As a matter of fact, when you go there with that, I'll say, gift, the theater applauds you, it reveres you. So
emotional generosity.
Yes, I like that. That's good.
Okay.
Well, even as a little kid, I loved the theater.
So, did you do theater in schools there in the
Yes.
Harrisburg area? Absolutely.
Yes, all through... There was a wonderful woman who lived down the block from us who did the neighborhood play, and you could be in it until 6th grade. And girl, I was the star. I did it every summer, and she loved me because I memorized easily.
Yeah.
And so, we would do all these skits from the 20s, 30s, 40s. It was adorable. And then from there, elementary school, I remember coming to the 6th grade music teacher who was doing Free to Be You and Me, the Marlowe Thomas musical. Mm-hmm. And there was William Wants a Doll. There was that story. And I went to her and I said, I want to play William. And she said, oh no, that's a boy. We have to have all the boys are going to try out for William. And at the end of the day, she came to me and she said, you want to try out for William? And I said, yes, I do. And I was William. And my parents had us singing in every choir there was imaginable. And because we played piano, we were often asked to accompany. And so we did orchestra. I was in the a cappella choir. I was in a madrigal choir. I was in the state choir. It was all like award-winning stuff because I had an incredible high school music teacher, David O'Dietz. He changed my life. Thank you, David O'Dietz.
Okay. But you end up, for college, you end up going to the North Carolina School of the Arts.
Yes, I wanted to be an actor, and that's all I knew. And my mother, who had many children, and one child in particular, my brother Hugh, wanted to play piano. He was the one out of all of us that kept going and playing piano. And she said, that's your master's. For your bachelor's, I want you to go to an undergrad. And so he did that, and he basically, it's not that he failed out, but he really wanted to play piano. And my mother, after a semester or two, said, let's rethink this. And so she researched, and he ended up auditioning for the Philadelphia College of Performing Arts, right, which then married the Philadelphia College of Arts and became the University of the Arts. Right. He also auditioned for the Curtis. And because of his journey, and now he's a professional musician, he teaches, he's got his PhD in piano. Because of that journey, I think my mother said, okay, you want to be an actor? Let's find out what you do. And she read a Smithsonian article that had the North Carolina School of the Arts, and there was a summer program. Mm-hmm. So she sent me to that, and I loved it, and then auditioned the following year. They take 10 women and 20 men, or they did at that point.
Wow,
and then they cut you back each year.
Oh, yeah.
So my graduating class was 11.
Right.
And it was like living underneath a knife.
Yeah.
A Damocles sword.
NYU when I started too. It was very
brutal.
Very
brutal.
Yeah.
And I was a bumpkin from Central PA. I didn't know from mask work, and I had taken tap class, but I didn't know modern movement. So I felt, and I was a beautiful Vastic girl, so I was a little bit embarrassed about my body, and they insisted that we wear leotards all the time, black leotards with no coverings, no t-shirts with any words on them, very Moscow Arts Theater. And I ended up being cut my first year. And I went to them, to the, one teacher, and I said, if this was because of this class. And she said, oh, no, you were fine in this class. It was this other class. So I went to that class, and that man said, oh, no, it was in the other. So I wrote to the dean, and I said, I'm getting the runaround. I'm not exactly sure why I'm cut, but I would like to reapply. And it was unheard of. You couldn't appeal as a freshman. And I got a note from housing saying, you're delinquent on your bill, and I paid it right away. And from then I was on what they call probation. And then my first test was a beautiful Lillian Hellman play. And then I was kind of in from then on. And then they started testing me, and they put me in Nina in The Seagull. And then finally in my junior year, they did Hamlet, and they cast me as Hamlet. So I went from really being insecure and not knowing what I was doing to having a firm footing. And I'm really glad I stayed, because so much of what we do in this business is who you know. And from all my jobs in Philadelphia, it kind of went from one thing to one thing to one thing as I met people. Mm. So I'm very glad I stayed. Of the School of the Arts career, they have you go to New York, and you go to the League of Theaters, which at that time was regional theaters and agents and casting directors to come and watch your 2 scenes and maybe a song they sing. And after I did that and graduated, I went back home to Central PA, and I got a call from the Walnut Street saying, we saw you at the Leagues, and we'd like you to come audition for our brand new, first time ever, F. Otto Haas Theater Apprenticeship.
Who was it that called you?
Some girl. And she changed my life, because I said, oh no, I bought a ticket to Europe, and I'm going because I want to do English-speaking theater in Europe. I had a German teacher who came from Berlin and had done lots of English-speaking theater. Mm-hmm. And she said, I can connect you. And so I set a headshot and resume. I bought a one-way ticket. My sister lived in Germany. I had a friend in Spain, a friend in Italy. And I was like, I'm going to Europe. And this girl at the Walnut Street said, You should never turn down an audition. It's great practice. So I came, and I didn't care if I got it because I knew I had an agenda.
You had that, I don't need this.
I had that, I don't need this. And at the end of the interview, they offered me the apprenticeship. And I went home and I talked to my mother, and she said, my very practical, raised 7 children mother, said, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Go to Europe, spend a couple of weeks there, and then come back and do this apprenticeship for a year. And that's what I did. That was 40 years ago next year, and I've been here ever since.
So you moved to Philadelphia? Did you find a place to live? Did it help you at all?
Did. No.
What this out?
They said, here's your whatever it was, 150 a week or whatever, or 115 I think it was, which to me was, boatloads of cash. I shared my apartment with someone that I had worked with. I got a waitressing job, and I waited tables for lunches when I could. And at that time, we did outreach programs. We did.
So what year was this?
This was 87.
87?
And I did an outreach program of Shakespeare, and a couple scenes from Shakespeare, and then a couple scenes from like Mark Twain, things put together. And boy, did I learn all of the regions of Philadelphia. We went to high schools and elementary schools all over the place, so I got to know all the neighborhoods. And the people that were in that, there was a wonderful man, Ed Shockley, who played Othello to my Amelia, and he said at the end of my apprenticeship, I'm going to be doing a sign in the Sidney Brustein's window at the Black Theater Festival that Albert Bensby had on South Street. That's exactly right. And he said, I'd love for you to be in that. He ended up directing the Eugene O'Neill piece that was with Interact that went to Ireland. And so that's how I got involved with Interact. So it was from one theater to the next theater to the next theater. In the beginning, it was because of Ed.
Right. And so we've talked to Seth and Frank Wood about that.
Oh, wonderful.
Interact.
My husband in another role we play.
Yes, right. We talked with Seth about you and Edward Albee and Albee coming to see Seascape, where you were playing the middle-aged woman, and his observed quite astutely that you were not a middle-aged woman, which he apparently objected to in some way.
Yeah. I mean, I think his hands were tied, and he was, persona non grata at that time, like in the 90s.
True, he was in the general theater world. He couldn't get shows down on Broadway anymore.
Right. So I think he was excited about this young upstart, that Seth Rosen, and people being interested in his play, and it was great.
Yeah, I mean, Seth described it as he was standoffish and he wouldn't talk to anybody at the party, but I wonder if he was just very shy.
Yeah, and also opinionated.
Right. But so you went off on this tour to Ireland.
Yes.
Tell us your side of the story.
Oh my
we
gosh.
Heard Seth.
We got there and they said, well, here's the actor van, or there's a truck, and does anyone want to drive the truck? And I was like, be in the truck where I can listen to my own music and there's only one other person, or be with 7 actors in a van. I'll drive the truck. So I drove the truck on the right side of the car, on the left side of the road, and we drove all over Ireland and did these plays. And at the second venue, I think, our truck was opened up and everything was stolen. All of our costumes, all of our set, and we were literally busking on the street and saying things like, sexual perversity in Chicago, come see us at the Snooker Hall, blah, blah, blah. And we were just determined, us scrappy young kids, that we were not leaving. We had booked a month to be in Ireland, and we did it. We raised enough money, and we scrounged together costumes, and we performed, and it was incredible. It was a magical trip.
Well, coming back from that, did you step right into something else?
Well,
how did things keep happening for you after that?
It's just who you know. When I was an apprentice here, Bernard was really exploring opening up the theater to all kinds of other audiences and using Studio 3 and 5 as a place for young theater companies to come. Exactly. They would come and have their season here or have a show here, and then he would get people passing through the lobby and interested in all the shows. So the Arden Theater had auditions on the third floor where we are. And I poked my head in and I said, I can't audition because I'm being this apprentice now and then I'm going to do the next thing. But for your next season, please consider me. And something sparked between, it was Aaron Posner said, you had a bright face. And so he called me in. Actually, when I came back, I think they were doing the As You Like It that really put them on the map. It was like 7 actors playing all the parts, very inventive, super charming, and incredible actors.
You just said one of them just came to see our show. I should mention at this point that you and I are here at the Walnut because we're both performing in the final weekend now of Edward Albee's A Delicate Balance.
Yes.
And we've snuck upstairs back to the third floor studio to talk here in this little dressing room. But you just had a friend that was visiting, that was a couple weeks ago.
Barbara Pitts McAdams. Oh, she's an incredible theater artist, and she worked at the Arden for years.
Well, she was in that production.
That's right. She was Celia. She relocated from the West Coast to be in that production, and she was wonderful. And she's remained one of my best friends.
Right. But she said it. She wanted to come up here and see that space.
Yes,
this is where it all began for her.
Yeah.
So it began, a lot of people have their sort of beginnings here, and a lot of theater companies have their beginnings.
So true.
And I've noticed, looking back, and if I do a search for Grace Gonglewski on my newspaper archive app, all of these stories come up with you at the Arden Theater. Arden really seems to become your home for a while.
Yes, it did. And it all started with that As You Like It, because I knew I couldn't do it, and it was already cast, and I said, I'll assistant direct. So I assistant directed that production, and then it had another life. It went to the riverfront. It performed down...
on Penn's Landing.
That's right, on Penn's Landing, and then it went to People's Light. So, but Aaron and I really got... we just loved working with one another. We got really tight. We still are. And I did many productions where I was in this dressing room here on Studio 3. I did Shooting Simone wasn't the Arden, but I did The Sneeze.
The Chekhov story.
That's right. That's right. And Girl with the Silver Eyes.
Right. Because mainly at the early years, they often would adapt literary works
yes,
in a stage form.
That was their mission.
Right.
Exactly. Great storytellers. I think that they then went to St. Stephen's Alley.
Well, yes, but with an interesting side trip over to MTI Studios in West Philadelphia to do Godspell.
Oh, gosh, that was an incredible experience, and that was my first time working with Terry. And you probably couldn't do it now, but what he did was he took us up to the rehearsal space, and he would say... So here's the Bible story that they're telling in Godspell. You 6 go over there and you improvise. You 2 go over there and improvise. And we would take these stories and we would bring all of our skills to it. And we would come back with, instead of doing the actual written script for Godspell with these sort of dated 1960s scenarios, we would come back with our own rich sources and talents. And that was what made it so special.
You used the score.
Yes, absolutely. What a wonderful score.
So you have a new book. And maybe there was such a small Philadelphia theater company, nobody from Samuel French was coming down to check you out?
Yes, I mean, we used the book all the way through, but when we got to the parables, that was what was changed and unique. Yeah, and we all fell in love with one another. Yeah. You can imagine. We all were born again.
So to speak. Well, yeah, had you had a religious upbringing up to that?
I did have a religious upbringing.
Family, yes?
Not Catholic, actually. No. My father was raised Catholic and sort of Catholicized to death, and he had a big search, and he invited us all on that search. So we would go to Mass, we would go to temple, we would go to Baha'i birth, we would... whatever was igniting him at the time. And then he found a small Protestant sect called the Church of the Brethren. Oh. And he was baptized in that, and then we all became very active in that church. But I call it a get your hands dirty church. Right. So it was really about service. And of course there was lots of music, and there was a drama thing that we did. So I loved that. And then from there I graduated to the Quakers. And I am now a Quaker, and I'm very active in my meeting.
So then, going back to Godspell, it's a play that doesn't require you to have a Christian message, but it's certainly there and available.
Oh yeah.
And certainly it's for young people and a lot of emotional enthusiasm. And when you say you all fell in love with each other, were relationships developing among the cast?
Yes. Began a very close relationship with Robert Christoph, and we were engaged.
Just arrived from Michigan.
That's right. And then there were other people too. John Tazwell, and Peg became his wife, and his brother's Paul Tazwell, who's the wonderful costume designer, did Wicked. And John is an incredible theater artist, worked with the Arden doing their outreach program with me and Robert back in the early days. So anyway, lots of relationships, lots of wonderful friendships.
At that time of life. That
yes,
would be the normal
yes.
thing to happen. Completely expected. But as you mentioned, the Arden is then moving to, it's spending its 4 or 5 years at St. Stephen's.
Yep.
What were you working on there? I'm seeing you're working on, they were doing Shakespeare and Shaw a lot.
Shaw. It was incredible. We did Man and Superman, which was...
Greg Wood and you.
Yes, and Jen Childs.
Right.
And
Doug Wing.
Oh, Doug Wing. He was my father a couple of times, and he was brilliant. And what Aaron did was such an interesting thing. He would have a big desk and then some throw pillows and a carpet around, and then he would have these Bach, little minuets come in, and we would all come in and hold a different prop, a steering wheel, and then we'd lift up the desk and turn it over, all in time to the music. And we would create Act 2 and Act 3, all from the props. It was, we would get applause every night. So he was extremely inventive, and of course Aaron loves language. I did the Brothers Karamazov, which they called it the Brothers K, and Terry.
Was that Aaron's adaptation?
It was Terry's, I believe, or maybe it was both of them.
Possibly.
Yeah, and maybe they co-directed. Gosh, it was so long ago, but it was incredible, and Robert was in that. Mm-hmm. We had a wonderful time. The set where all these poles sort of crisscrossed, and Robert would grab a pole and hang by his arm, and it was just so physical and really wonderful, and of course the language was fantastic.
Right. And then after 4 or 5 years there, they then find their space over on 2nd Street, and they begin to create that space. And you're in the first show in the upstairs the space there. Then they're doing again Shaw. They're doing Major Barbara.
Yes.
Right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Who was in that production?
Doug Wing was Undershaft, and Hazel Bowers was the mom, and she was a battle axe. She was fantastic. Right. She's just about to celebrate her 90th birthday, and I'm just about to send her in a birthday card photographs of herself as Britomart. And Jen Childs and Scott Greer.
You also did a Midsummer Night's Dream there, speaking of Scott and Jen and Robert.
It was an incredible production. That was the opener of the Haas, and it was the first time that Aaron had worked with Teller of Penn and Teller. So he came and did the magic. He levitated to Tanya. He had Oberon levitate her, and we were all sworn to secrecy. We weren't allowed to know how it was happening, and if we were part of the magic trick and we knew, we weren't allowed to tell. And then he did this wonderful thing with Puck, Robert Christoph, where he enabled him to use whatever magic he had inside his own, rascally self. So with me, to put all the lovers to sleep, he used a crystal that would sort of be a pendulum. With Ian Merrill Peaks, he read Goodnight Moon, sped read it, then, conked out Demetrius. And then with Scott Greer, he took a big plastic hammer and beat him over his head. So it was just so... He talked to us, Teller did, about magic, about how, it's this artifice that invites the audience in and makes them feel magical.
I'm hoping someday to get him on the podcast.
Oh my gosh!
Because again, it's originally a Philadelphian.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He went to Central High School.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he taught Latin.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, and they started, and Teller started in the 5th floor studio.
Oh my gosh, no way. Oh, they're brilliant. I love it. So cool.
Yeah. I've talked about that a number of times on the podcast. You'll get to that. You haven't got to that.
I haven't. I'm in Edwin Forrest days. Fanny Kemble. Loving
it.
You
got to get through the 19th century. So as a Philadelphia theater artist, you must have been completely committed to the project of what's going on here in this town.
Yes.
What was the feeling amongst artists like you that are working regularly, that are working with exciting young directors, that are doing classic plays? I feel like I don't need to go anywhere else, and this is all is everything I wanted to do with my artistic life? Was there that feeling around?
It was a new, exciting feeling. There were so many new theater companies starting, so many new theater companies with brand new missions. And there were old-timers like Tom McCarthy and Doug Wing who had been walk-ons at the Walnut Street and the Drama Guild. And so we could hear from them, oh, now I'm playing Undershaft at this new theater company called the Arden. And we could see that there were possibilities here. I had graduated from School of the Arts, and I had many friends who were knocking down doors in New York who were not getting hired. They had been there for 4, 5, 6 years, and they couldn't work, and it was killing them. And I was here doing Major Barbara and like doing all kinds of things. And so I was like, you know what? I don't want fame and fortune and Broadway as much as I want to work. I want to be able to do Shaw. I want to be able to do Taming of the Shrew. I want to be able to do these new playwrights that were working here. There was also a feeling of when a New Yorker did come to town, they were so desperate to get their name in the press that they would sort of elbow everybody out to push to the fore, to get a notice. And my friends and I, like Jen Childs, we were house sitting for each other and babysitting and saying, well, this is my tax guy. Like, we were friends. And so when all of a sudden Jen had a lead and I was a bit part in the back, I was like, go girl, stand, like go forward. Like I wanted the best for her. And that was a different sensibility. And so I was like, yeah, I'll take that over New York. I'm more interested in community that is supporting artists and artists creating lots of good work than, trying to get on Days of Our Lives.
And it's just about then, in the mid and late 90s, when the Philadelphia Fringe Festival starts out.
Yes.
Got a Nick Stuccio and another guy named, what's his name again?
Wonderful Eric Schofer.
Okay.
Yeah, he did a beautiful piece called Icarus, which was about the young man, trying to learn how to fly. That was in Smoke, which was he was trying to get the rights. He's my husband, by the way.
Okay.
He was trying to get the rights to do it underneath the Ben Franklin Bridge, and he would just go and think about it and apply, and the
Florida. That was a lot of it. He was a dancer, but he was doing suspended from ropes.
That's right. He was a dancer, a yoga teacher, a rock climber, and so he used rock climbing harnesses, but he would put his dancers backwards, and so they would go forward instead of sitting back on their butt. And then they could run with this rope attached to them and eventually go over, God, the audience heads. It was remarkable. And I was doing Hedda Gabler at the Arden at the time, and he came in and talked to Terry and me about directional modalities, and I would go and run the box office for him. Like, we were at that time really falling in love and super excited about creating art. And he lived in Old City, and he looked around and he said, he went to the Edinburgh Festival, and he was performing there, and he invited Nick Stuccio to be his producer. And Nick said, oh, no, I'm not a producer, I'm a ballet dancer. And Eric said, no, I think you've really got what it takes. And so Nick signed on, and they went and had a great time. And they were both living in Old City. And Eric said, I think we could do that same kind of thing. We could take over this whole Old City area, and so they went to every single art studio, and they went to Old City Coffee, and they donated coffee, and they went to Fergie, and he donated beer. And
Fergie Morrow and Sanson.
Yeah, who's a huge theater supporter.
Yeah,
I was on the board of Brat Productions, which was a
Maddie and Stefano.
That's right, incredible, scrappy theater company that could, and Fergie was on that board too. So we got to be great friends. Anyway, yeah, the Fringe took off, and Eric and I did too.
That's wonderful. So things are going well in your life. And did we were walking down the street in Old City the other day together because we went to go see a show at the Arden, and you sort of looked over your shoulder and said, oh, yeah, that was Eric's apartment. And I could see many memories flooding into you from that period. But you move farther out, and you settled in together into the Northwest.
That's right, Mount Airy. Yeah, Eric grew up in Germantown, and so he was familiar with that area, and he said, oh, Lincoln Drive. I was living in Brewery Town, had been for 14 years, at a great big old house, which the Arden often used for actor housing because it was so cheap. I could live in this big place by myself, and I'd be like, sure, you can house that guy here. Just pay my heating bill, which they would. So that was a great arrangement. But that house was basically slated for demolition, so I couldn't buy that. And it was getting very expensive in that area. So I started looking in Mount Airy, and I just fell in love with it. And I'm so glad that we moved there. And we've been there since 2001.
You did come back to the Walnut several times.
Yes.
The work here is now. I know you've worked with the Arden, you've worked with Interact, you've worked with the Theater Company,
1812, the Wilma.
Yes, you've seen all the names that we've been talking about all this time. But since we're here, let's talk about what it was like to come back to the Walnut and work here. What was the first big role you came back here to do? Was that the Heiress, or was it Three Tall Women?
I think it was Three Tall Women, yeah.
And it was you, and who were the other two tall women?
Oh, gosh. Mel Dowd and Alice White, and Jeff Kuhn was in it as well.
Playing the young man, the all-big figure. Yeah.
Yes, and they were incredible. They were very, very ballsy women, and it was, I was just a young whippersnapper, so it was a great honor to be there. And the director, Malcolm Black, he was just wonderful and a great believer in me. So most of the things that
Malcolm was one of the Canadian directors that
That's
actually
right.
predated Bernard.
Is that right?
Yes, he was
Wow.
working here with the Drama Guild back in the 70s.
Wow.
He told me, I did the Amadeus with him, and he was
Oh,
telling
my
me about-
gosh.
Yeah, so I remember Malcolm. God bless him.
God bless him. And he and Bernard were great friends. And so
course.
they did a lot of, they invited me back a lot together. And Hillary, the wonderful costume designer that Malcolm always worked with, she was always a part of that. And you can see a lot of her etchings in the green room and in the halls.
But that was Three Tall Women is a very spiky and difficult and challenging text. How did that go over here at the Walnut, which is known for having a more populist approach? And Bernard himself often says, vox populi, the voice of the people.
Right.
So he's more about doing musicals that people will know. I mean, it's not like it's easy stuff, but it's stuff that is approachable. But as occasionally he'll throw in things like Three Tall Women,
Yes.
or Delicate Balance,
Yes.
or The Humans,
Yes.
which is definitely a challenge because he is interested in that material as well. What was it like doing Three Tall Women in front of the Philadelphia audience at that time?
Well, I think you're very astute in that it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Right.
And so those who are not interested don't come or leave. And those who are interested dig down deep. And the woman that I played, she sort of goes first, and her monologue is so sweet and sort of, well, half sweet, but it's this walk down memory lane. And a lot of the Walnut patrons are of a certain age. Mm-hmm. And so her memory lane was their memory lane. So I felt like my part was very well received. And there was lots of, laughter and camaraderie. And then the play goes in some really cool and interesting places, and there's surprises, so I won't spoil things for people, but those surprises always have the chickens coming home to roost. People were always like, oh! And
I do like surprises here. I like it.
Boy.
It's nice when it lands in a house big enough to have that big, so you can really feel things land in a way that you can in some of the more intimate houses where we often spend time working.
And I remember most of the plays that I did in the early days, we were not mic'd. And so there was a great amount of, warming up and getting ready and hitting that back wall. Yeah, I loved those days of really having to be a superwoman.
What is a work that you remember as you're now hitting? You have your children. You and Eric have
a child, just one, Sylvia.
And they are now through school.
That's right.
As you're now entering the sort of peak of your mature career, you had already done so many great big roles. What are you now finding you're able to do?
I think that there's so much ageism, and there's also not that many roles for older women, which I'm now becoming. So I thought that I would be doing more than I am doing. And that was a hard thing to wake up to realize that it doesn't just keep rolling out. I used to do 4, 5, 6 things a year easily. And now I do 1 or 2 things, if I'm lucky, a year. I'd say I'm all right with that. Now I feel like there's some pieces that I do that take me to a beautiful place. And there's some pieces that I do that are, don't pay any money but are really, really meaningful. And there's some things that are more commercial and, don't grab my heart but give me a huge paycheck, thank God. And I'm here for all of it. I love doing all of it, and I just want to keep working.
Grace, one more thing. I posted the episode about the Trocadero, and you said to me, I did the last striptease at the Trocadero Theater. I'm sorry, you did what? This great actress of Shaw and Ibsen and Shakespeare does what? Tell me what that was. What is that story?
There was a wonderful theater company called Big Mess Theater. Greg Giovanni, that's right. And Andy Bresnan was Big Mess Orchestra, and they would do a cabaret. It started to support Manna, which was delivering food to homebound HIV people, and then ACT UP. And we would do a benefit for them. Andy would create the songs and reorchestrate them, and then we would have different characters, drag queens or drag whatever. And my character, they named me Gracefully, and I would sing. My famous tune was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's a beautiful day. And then at the end, they would say, do you like her dress? 'Cause it's for sale. And then Carlotta Tendant, Michael Byrne, she would auction off the dress, and we would raise sometimes several $1,000s for ACT UP or Manna in the early days.
And you would drop a shoulder strap?
Oh, girl. Yeah. No, I can't. I went all the way down to, kind of 1960s undies. Okay. But the very last time, I took it all off.
Wow.
Yeah.
And why do you say that was the last one ever to be at the truck? How did you, because then what happened?
The truck closed.
Right.
So
you...
I was the very last one. We had a great relationship with the woman who ran the truck, and so she would look forward to us being, doing our thing. Right. It felt like East Berlin. It felt like while George Bush was, coming to power and wars were being started, we were the freaks, and we were the counterculture, and we were celebrating love and power and joy. So it was a pleasure to take my clothes off for
Nouveau Berlin. What do you, sitting in this room, which you must have a number of times, what image pops into your head?
I have to say, doing Girl with the Silver Eyes with the Arden and Tom McCarthy. And at one point there was a person on stage who Tom shot him, and the gun didn't go off, and the guy grabbed his heart and fell over, and Tom turned around to the audience and said, "Bastard died of a heart attack." So I can't help but think of sweet Tom, who was really the epitome of Philadelphia actors when I came to town. He was just a mensch who would do anything, and was wonderful inside and out, as a person and as an actor.
But here in the Walnut in particular, where there is so many, there's so much history is literally on the walls everywhere. Where do you feel you fit in now, having been 40 years in Philadelphia theater history? Where do you feel that you fit in? What is your story arc in this narrative?
Golly, I'm just a working stiff,
There must, by now, Grace, dozens and dozens. Have you ever counted up how many shows?
No, I haven't. I mean, I know I've done 27, I think, things at the Arden. Some of my favorites were Charlotte in Little Night Music. That was incredible. And Kate in Taming of the Shrew, and Hedda Gabler was probably one of my favorite things. Maggie the Cat.
Right, you and Drake Wood.
Yeah.
Did Cat in a Hot Tin Roof.
Yeah, with Tom McCarthy.
Right.
And Sheila Bader, that was incredible. Megan Bellward. And Paul Nolan, I think, was Goober.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Grace Gonglewski, it is so wonderful to get you on the podcast. I am so pleased that you have become such a big fan of it.
I am a huge fan.
It's gratifying to me, and I am certainly a great fan of your work. So I don't like podcasts where the people on it just sort of quell over each other.
You can quell. Go ahead.
But I'm such a big fan of yours, and so I'm glad to have you here and have you talking to our audience. It's a great pleasure and a great honor.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
for coming
My
on the show.
pleasure. Thank you.